Hello, everybody. Welcome to AE911Truth Webinars. Richard Gage, AIA, architect of 28 years, member of the American Institute of Architects, founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, here along with Andy Steele, our operations coordinator. Hi, Andy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to today's webinar on the destruction of the World Trade Center towers, the 3 high-rises that fell in New York on that day. I just want to let you know that YouTube automatically defaults to a low resolution. So if you want to boost the resolution to see the slides more clearly, you can click the gearbox beneath the video and click 720 HD resolution. I also want to inform you that we've been having some problems with our internet today. So if at any time that you have difficulty hearing something, or the internet, like Richard's voice trails during the presentation and it's constant, let me know by submitting it through the question box that's beneath the screen, beneath the video screen here on this page. You can just let me know and we'll try to do something about that. As well, we will be taking questions related to the evidence that Richard is presenting here today. So you can submit the questions through that same box. That's it for me. Back to you, Richard.
All right, thanks so much, Andy. And we're broadcasting from Florida today. Very exciting. We've been to for 2 days, Ted Walter and myself representing AE911Truth at the chapter headquarters of the American Institute of Architects of the Alabama chapter, meeting in Orange Beach, Alabama. Very exciting opportunity to meet about 100 architects. We've got petitions signed, very good interchanges, lots of support, mostly all positive. I mean, there's a few people who, don't understand the nature of what we're talking about because they haven't yet had an opportunity to see the evidence that you're about to see in our webinar, which is week 1. So very excited to share with you today the evidence of week 1. We're going to overview the World Trade Center Building 7, the 3rd skyscraper to collapse. Most architects are completely unfamiliar with this particular skyscraper collapse, though it is the 3rd worst structural failure in modern history. So we're going to use the scientific method, look at it very objectively, see what the evidence holds, what it is, what it holds, what it yields, looking at the evidence of explosions, looking at the evidence of that have not been produced in the official reports that came out 7 years later. We'll look at what normal office fires can and can't accomplish. The normal office fires are the official cause of this building's collapse. And we'll be looking at pyroclastic flow. And next week we'll look a little this week at the massive heat that was produced and underneath this building, foreknowledge of its collapse, and expert opinions, of course, as we launch. Let me just let you know a little bit about myself. I've worked on these $3 and $10 million gymnasiums in the San Francisco Bay Area for this high school, performing the construction administration on this $125 million project. Also, that was earlier in my career. Later, I worked on these this $400 million commercial project with mid-rise office space, altogether about 1,200 tons of steel framing near Las Vegas, Nevada. And yet I've been working full-time on this because I'm representing in the last six years or so, I'm representing now 2,500 architects and engineers who are calling for a new investigation. And there's a good reasons why they are and why they have sponsored, so many of them being AIA members, about 100, who have sponsored our resolution on the floor of the AIA National Business Meeting in the annual convention in Philadelphia just last month, where we achieved 3 times as many votes. Very exciting. on the resolution, which calls upon AIA to call for a new investigation of this building. And this is our website where you can find much of this evidence. You can only ask questions, videos, you can volunteer and help us. It's AE911Truth.org. That's the name of the URL there. You can get to our website if you're not there already. We have 9/11 being responsible for a number of very important aftermaths, including, of course, the invasions of 2 countries in which over 1 million people have perished. A global war on terror consuming $4.5 trillion, at least so far. The loss of our civil liberties in legislation, executive orders, that we've basically given up our right to a free trial, a lawyer, a jury. Most Americans don't know this, but the Patriot Act and the Military Commissions Act and the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012 allow us now in this country to be arrested without charge, held indefinitely. It's not a good situation. Of course, a whole lot of other issues that follow, and all of which date back to 9/11. So when people say to me, why are you looking at this? This is 15 years old. Well, all these things are still going on, or still deeply affecting our country, our foreign policy, our very freedom and economy. So we're still paying for all of this. So our grandchildren will still be paying for all of this. So, but we're going to focus today on the science. And the science begins with the scientific method. We have a question. How do the towers come down? Oh, we formulate that question as clearly as we can. We do some background research, make some observations first. How have other towers come down? Well, we construct a hypothesis based on all of the hypotheses that are rational, that make sense. We don't exclude any. That we look at based on our research, we come up with all the possible answers and objectively look at them, test them with experiments, analyze the results, and draw conclusions. If the hypothesis is corroborated, we report the results in an open, transparent manner. And that's important because others will build on the body of our work. And so we want that work to be open, not a black box to keep others from finding out exactly how we achieved our results. And indeed, that is what we'll find, for instance, NIST did relative to the computer input data for their models, which they used to try to prove that this building, Building 7, came down due to normal office fires. So we did a FOIA request, Freedom of Information, for instance, and they said, no, we can't tell you that information, the computer input data. It might jeopardize public safety. Well, how could it jeopardize public safety to give to the engineers and architects who are studying these buildings, who are tasked with ensuring the public safety, keeping this information from them? No. This is just one example of transparency and the violation of that key principle in the scientific method. There are many others. If the hypothesis is not corroborated, what do? We go back and we construct a hypothesis that has a better chance standing up against the evidence, the experiments, etc., the data. So with that in mind, we proceed and apply the scientific method by doing some background research. What are the forces that destroy buildings? Well, there are many, of course. Fire is certainly one of them. Fires move through a building every 20 minutes or so, burning out that area, moving on, looking for fresh new fuel sources. So when a fire destroys a building, and you'll find that never in the history of high-rises has any high-rise come down due to fire. But say in a wood frame building, it would begin to fall over in gradual phases. It will fall uh, toward the path of least resistance and not straight down through the unburnt building below, for instance, symmetrically. That doesn't happen, but it'll fall over in stages. But let's look at the history of high-rise as we do our background research. In Los Angeles, for instance, 62-story building burned over 3.5 hours over 5 floors. Didn't come down. In Philadelphia, 18 hours over 8 floors. Didn't come down. And in Caracas, Venezuela, burned 17 hours over 26 floors. No collapse. Indeed, fires have never brought down a skyscraper, but other forces, in this case, earthquakes, have brought down these buildings. We have a building that falls over. It's certainly mangled. It's certainly broken up, but its structural system is not dismembered. Its concrete is not pulverized to a fine powder. These are two features which are associated with another form of destruction we'll be looking at in a moment. So we're logging these forms of destruction in our mind as we proceed. And the next one is buildings that have been destroyed by explosions. Well, we have witnesses that hear sounds of explosions. They see flashes of light. There's a thick, billowing, enormous pyroclastic-like cloud defined with thick smoke and a solid edge around that, with unfolding cauliflower shapes due to the massive heat produced by the chemical reactions from the explosives. And so certainly the structures of these things are shattered. The lateral ejection of freely flying objects from them. These are features of exploded buildings. And of course, buildings can be destroyed by controlled demolition, where you place thousands of explosions to the joints and the columns and beams of the buildings. And they are then brought down because they are synchronistically timed floor by floor, because these explosives are placed strategically in the center first, usually, and then they're set off in the center and then toward the outside, often bringing a building inside of itself, or like in this case, from the side first. However, the engineers want to design it. It's usually from the bottom up. We're allowing for a symmetrical, usually, collapse, not in this case, but often. And often a free fall collapse, because the thousands of tons of structural columns in these buildings are removed. So there's only a handful of companies that can achieve this feat. In the United States, probably maybe a dozen around the world. It's a very, very highly engineered, complex task where often things go wrong and they don't work out at all. A fire has never done that to a building. We'll take a look at what fires can do to buildings in a moment. But these are features of classic controlled demolition. Sudden onset of destruction, usually at the base of the structure, a straight down symmetrical collapse into the building's footprint. Demolition waves, that's because demolition waves remove the column supports, resulting in a free fall, often acceleration, straight down through the path of what was the greatest resistance, resulting in the total dismemberment of the steel structure, broken up, ready for loading and shipment. It results in minimal damage, hopefully, to adjacent structures, and there are sounds of explosions heard by witnesses, flashes of light seen by them, enormous clouds of pulverized concrete because of these explosives, squibs or isolated explosive ejections occurring at various levels in the building, and of course chemical evidence of cutter charges left behind in the residue. If you have these key characteristic features of controlled demolition, or explosive destruction, you have evidence of such. and and fire, the official cause of Building 7's collapse, has never produced any of these key features, let alone all of them. So that's really important, and it gives us a path to proceed down with the scientific method to see what happened to Building 7. Now, of course, if we have additional support, government documentation, experts agree it's a controlled demolition, well, at least those experts who don't have $100,000 contracts with the federal government, which might bias their opinion about whether something is sensitive as the World Trade Center destructions or controlled demolition or not. But say those experts who don't have such biases, we would feel much more at ease with those opinions. Foreknowledge of the destruction. These are planned months in advance. If you have foreknowledge, often, since fire's never brought down a skyscraper, this can be very, very important circumstantial evidence. And video documentation, of course, is key. What's the building doing? How is it behaving? This is all proof of controlled demolition. So with that piece of research in mind, let's proceed and look at Building 7. Did you know about it? Most architects and engineers, as I go through the country and others talk to them, they actually don't know about the third worst structural failure in modern history, as I didn't until 4 years after 9/11 when I heard about it on the radio. Well, this should have been the most studied building failure in all, because guess what? It wasn't hit by a plane. So it doesn't have some of the kind of the cover that the Twin Towers had relative to their destruction. The cover of the jet fuel and plane impacts, for instance. It would be the tallest building in most of our states. It's a huge building. Here it's half the size of the Twin Towers, but you can see before the Twin Towers were built, it commanded a stately, well, it was built after the towers, but other than the Twin Towers, it commanded quite a presence in the city. Huge building. Each floor is the size of a football field. So it's about 110 yards or so from the North Tower, and it sustained some damage, a little bit of damage. NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, assures us that this was not a significant factor in the building's collapse. Well, we'll find out what was. But you can see it standing here, tall, you know, where it collapsed about 5:20 in the afternoon, this building. So what are the features of this building's destruction? And do they match any of the features of a classic controlled demolition? Let's compare. Do we have a sudden onset of destruction at the base of the structure? Well, let's listen to this emergency worker, Daryl, a medical student, who was quite close nearby. Oh, great. There we go.
The building went on fire, and you know, we heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. Turned around, we were shocked to see that the building was, well, it looked like there was a shock wave ripping through the building, and the windows all busting out, and you know, it was horrifying. And then, you know, about a second later, the bottom floor caves out, and the building followed after that, and we saw the building crash down all the way to the ground. You know, we were in shock, and then the worst part.
A shock wave ripping through the building, the windows busting out, and after that, the building coming down. So they're hearing the explosions, and then the building comes down. That's pretty important. It's not like the building's collapsing and then producing these explosions, which they then hear. Let's listen to Dan Rather as he narrates his first view of his look at Building 7.
What you're seeing are high shots. Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself. Now we go to videotape the collapse of this building.
amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
Well, that's very helpful terminology, Dan. He's never repeated that, though, after 9/11/2001. In fact, with about 4 exceptions, we have not seen this building, again, one of the worst structural failures in history, played on national media. Why? We have questions, lots of questions like that, of course. Let's see if it comes down straight and symmetrically into its footprint, one of the other characteristic features. Well, here it is from West Street. You can see it collapsing. Yeah, pretty straight down, pretty symmetrical. How does that happen? We'll take a look at that, but look for now at the screen wall, the main penthouse up above. You see that it is falling just a half a second prior to the overall building, indicating core column damage, all core columns underneath it that are supporting it. So they must have all been taken out. This violates the official story, which we'll share with you later in this broadcast, that claims that the structural failure started in the northeast corner. Very interesting. Well, I'm not quite convinced yet. Let's see. Let's put building 7 on the left, some known controlled demolitions on the right. Is there any similarity? Is there enough similarity to warrant an investigation into the possible use of explosives, especially since it looks exactly like a controlled demolition which uses explosives? Is there enough similarity to warrant an investigation into anything other than fire? We can't even see the fires in these particular views. And fires never brought down a high-rise, ever. Wouldn't we expect NIST to examine carefully the hypothesis of controlled demolition? Probably their chief hypothesis that they should have pursued. No, they dismissed it altogether. In fact, these are the fires that they focused on to prove their point that this building came down due to these fires. And these are the largest fires that we have photographic or video evidence of. No other fires. So these fires, the worst ones here, are on the 12th floor, where NIST focuses its investigation into the initiation of collapse by thermal expansion, long span beams. We'll come back to that. Pushing a girder off of its seat due to expansion from these fires. Well, let's look at the how is a building brought down symmetrically? How do you do that? Well, one would have to remove all of the columns on a given floor virtually at once, and then repeat that floor by floor for 8 floors, because that's the distance over which this building fell very, very, very fast, virtually free fall. We'll talk about that in a minute. How do you remove all 8 columns, all 80 columns? Well, and the core columns, as we talked about, a half a second prior to the perimeters, that requires amazing precision, not the precision that fires have, certainly. How fast did the building come down? Did it come down at free fall acceleration? Well, you can see the building gaining downward momentum with each second. It fits the free fall curve exactly. What does that mean? If you take your keys out of your pocket and hold them up and drop them, that is free fall. And this building fell at that rate, acceleration, straight down through the path of what should have been the greatest resistance, the 40,000 tons of structural steel in this building, but it falls in 6.5 seconds through that structure. Fascinating. It's as if 8 stories of this building were removed all of a sudden, allowing it to fall freely. Where did that structure go? Well, here's what happened to it. It's completely dismembered into a pile 4 stories tall, like a house of cards, maybe 6 stories at the center. So here we have a moment-resisting steel frame building that all of a sudden one member is dismembered from another in order to allow it to fall like a house of cards. Can fire do that? Remember, buildings that fall naturally due to natural causes, the structure is not completely dismembered and its concrete is not pulverized. And witnesses don't hear sounds of explosions. Our next characteristic feature. Well, do we have such witnesses? Here's Kevin McPadden, former Air Force medic.
And then it was like another 2-3 seconds. You heard explosions, like boom. And it's like a distinct sound. It's not like in compression, like boom, 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 like floors that were dropping and collapsing. This was boom, and like you felt a rumble in the ground, like almost like you wanted to grab onto something. That, to me, I knew that was an explosion. There was no doubt in my mind.
That's pretty important testimony. Let's listen to this.
I'm going to call in. He was here when it all happened. He saw for health. What you saw, what you heard.
Standing like 2 blocks away, I've seen a big flash, and I've seen the building coming down, and I just seen people just running everywhere. Like.
Fascinating. And this too.
Stairwelling. We made it to 6th floor. Then we made it to 8th floor. I was on the set. Like an explosion. Yes. The walking down the stairs, we made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor. When we get outside, police officer comes to me and says, you have to run. We have more information of bombs, so you have to run.
More information of bombs, explosions. This is pretty important information.
And Richard, I'm gonna jump in because there was a bit of a lag on my end. So if you could just reiterate the key points of what was just said in some of those audios because they didn't come through.
Oh, thank you, Andy. Sorry about that. We do have an internet connection here, obviously, but it is not what we would have hoped for the broadcast, thus the lags. So there had 3 interview witnesses of explosions that were interviewed. And that's incredibly damning because guess what? Not one of those witnesses, most of whom were, and others, many of whom, dozens, were known and interviewed by NIST, by, in fact, the 9/11 Commission and others, FEMA, and yet we don't have one, not even one instance or witness of explosions, report of explosions occurring in the final report. Explosions like these that hopefully you'll hear.
Yeah, here's one of the guys. He can tell you I'm okay. All right. Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
So here's a huge explosion that you can hear yourself. By the way, on certainly on our video, which is if you go to architects-engineers.org. You can see the 15-minute video narrated by Ed Asner, which is focused solely on the mystery of the collapse of Building 7. Very, very excellent short film. And so Do we have enormous pyroclastic-like clouds of pulverized concrete? Well, the NFPA 921, our fire and explosion investigation guide in this country, it's accepted as the authority in this field and used by investigators. It says, well, look for large volumes of gas and the large amount of heat released in chemical explosions, causing rapidly expanding plumes of hot gases. Those are the cauliflower-shaped pyroclastic-like clouds that we referred to earlier. Well, we have those racing away from the destruction of Building 7 in every direction at 35 miles an hour or so. Are these extremely thick, rapidly expanding, immensely hot pyroclastic-like clouds that are obviously produced by a lot more heat than the few small scattered fires that we just showed you. Where did all this heat come from? And by the way, where did all of this incredible quantity of pulverized concrete come from? We'll be looking at that. Well, so far, with these first 8 key characteristics of explosive destruction, we've shown that it's direct evidence of controlled demolition. And fire can't create any one of them, let alone all of them. Remember, fire is the official reason for this building's collapse. So we'll look next week at the next exciting the final 2 exciting sections, because we have a lot of detail to share with you about that. Section 9 and 10, including pools of molten iron and chemical evidence of thermite. We'll come back to that. But right now, let's take a look at these fires. Because, you know, fires, if there was any of these World Trade Center buildings that were going to come down due to fire, we might expect it to be this one, World Trade Center 5, which was obviously fully engulfed in fire. Not a few small scattered fires, but did it come down? No. Mid-rises, high-rises, fireproofed steel frame buildings do not come down due to fire. Never have before 9/11, never have since. Not even in China, where we have this 44-story conflagration in this building, this hotel, the Mandarin Hotel in China. Floor to ceiling. Did it come down? Well, not really. No, I didn't. Before on the left, after on the right, slightly toasted around the edges, remodeled and being put back into use. So that is awesome proof of the capability of these buildings. Yet these small scattered fires brought this building down in 6.5 seconds, symmetrically at free fall. You can begin to see why. There's 2,700 architects and engineers demanding a new investigation, and why the pressure upon the American Institute of Architects to look seriously at this problem is mounting. It's completely destroyed for the first time ever, like a house of cards. No, they're not buying it. How about FEMA? FEMA did a report in 2002 in May. Let's take a look at it. They actually cast doubt on their own theory, which was fire-based. The specifics of the fires in World Trade Center 7 and how they caused the building to collapse remain unknown at this time. What? Unknown? Our best hypothesis, fire plus random damage, has only a low probability of occurrence. Wait a minute. What do you do in the scientific method when your best hypothesis has a low probability of occurrence? You go back and you find another one that has a better probability of occurrence. Well, that's not what they did, but they did suggest to NIST, who took over this investigation in 2004, and they said further research, investigation, and analysis are needed to resolve the issue. But unfortunately for those hoping to resolve the issue, the evidence, much of it, 50,000 tons of it, beginning 2 weeks after 9/11 for Building 7 was shipped away, loaded on barges, and shipped to China for recycling, without any opportunity for the structural engineers to analyze, do a forensic examination of steel in an unprecedented steel frame collapse. This is unconscionable. 400 truckloads a day they were hauling out of World Trade Center 7 to be destroyed. This is the illegal destruction of evidence in a crime scene. Well, they declared it an act of war. So they were not bound by the required procedures of evidence preservation. Okay, building fire expert and editor-in-chief Bill Manning of this credible 125-year-old fire engineering magazine says, crucial evidence that could answer many questions. It's on the slow boat to China, showing an astounding ignorance of government officials to the value of a thorough scientific investigation. The destruction and removal of evidence must stop immediately. But it wasn't. What do the experts say? Well, here's one outside the United States, maybe a little bit more objective. The top European-controlled demolition expert, Danny Jawenko, somebody showed him a laptop before telling him what it was he was looking at and said, what does this look like to you? He says, well, it starts from below. They've simply blown away the columns. He's looking at this video on this laptop. It's a controlled demolition. Team of experts did this. It's professional work, without any doubt. And then they say, well, did you know this happened on 9/11? And he says, what? Really? No way. And they convince him, you know, that indeed it did, and prove it to him. And he says, well, God, they must have worked very fast. But he knows that you can't set up a controlled demolition in a day, particularly while a building is on fire. No, this building was not brought down on purpose in a decision made that day. So how about foreknowledge? Let's look at that. And of course, it takes months to plan and execute such a controlled demolition. Let's listen to these construction workers walking away, and police officers, from Building 7 after having heard an explosion behind them at Building 7, looking then straight into the camera of CNN and watching and saying this.
You hear that? Keep your eye on that building. It's coming down. The building is about to blow up. Moving back. All right, guys. We are looking back. It's a building. Flame and debris coming down.
The building is about to blow up. Flame and debris coming down. What are we to make of this foreknowledge? Does a building that's on fire blow up? Very interesting. What does Kevin McPadden say after he heard those explosions and described very specifically his experience, the ground shaking like you wanted to grab onto something? Before that, he and others were pulled back about 6 blocks away from Building 7. They were told it was coming down. And interestingly enough, he hears this from a radio held in the hands of a Red Cross worker.
At the last few seconds, he took his hand off, and you heard 3, 2, 1.
At the last few seconds, he took his hand off, and you heard 3, 2, 1. Does fire bring buildings down to countdowns? What's really going on here? Well, the BBC announced the collapse of this building 20 minutes before it ever happened. The unprecedented collapse by fire of a steel frame skyscraper. They apologize for this grievous error, citing the confusing events of the day. Does this make them psychic? What in the world is going on? Better than that, CNN announces the collapse of the building that morning. Let's listen.
In New York, Alan Dodd-Frank joins us on the phone in Lower Manhattan. Alan?
Aaron, just 2 or 3 minutes ago, there was yet another collapse or explosion. I'm now out of sight. A Good Samaritan has taken me in on Blaine Street. But at 11:15, another collapse or explosion following the 10:30 collapse of the second tower. And the firefighter who rushed by us estimated that 50 stories went down. The street filled with smoke. It was like a forest fire roaring down a canyon. Now,
And we may be experiencing some technical difficulties here. I just want to alert Richard, if you can hear me, that the audio has stopped. But as you can see here, CNN was reporting the destruction of this building long before the actual collapse happened. And again, this is an unprecedented event, a 47-story steel frame high-rise falling in 7 seconds that day. So this is something that should not have been predicted to happen, yet it was ahead of time. Richard, can you hear me? Okay, everybody, I want to apologize for the technical difficulties. If you are still hearing me, again, we're going to be asking for your questions today on the materials that you've just seen. But as you can see, there is a lot of questions regarding the destruction of Building 7. And so that's why we are asking building and technical professionals to come forward. And if you agree simply that this needs to be investigated again, we do invite you to sign our petition at AE911Truth.org, where you can join at least now 2,500 architects and engineers who have signed this petition simply calling for the new investigation, along with thousands of others. Many people involved in different building science trades, as well as various sciences like physics, chemistry, metallurgy, and there's many people that are featured in our movie 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out, which you can watch for free on the internet. Just Google Experts Speak Out. It should come right up for you. You can also get the DVDs at our store, but we invite you to watch that. We also have a booklet currently available called Beyond Misinformation: What Science Says About the Destruction of World Trade Center Towers 1, 2, and 7. And it's a 50-page booklet. It outlines a lot of the evidence that is being shown today, not just regarding World Trade Center 7, but also the Twin Towers as well. So you can buy that at our stores, or you can download the link here right off of this webinar webpage, the free PDF. That way you can watch it or read it for free on your computer and then pass it on to other people who might be interested. Now, if you will just please be patient for just a moment. We're going to see what is happening here with our technical difficulties, and I'm hoping that we can get the presentation back on in just a moment. Okay, everybody. Again, I want to apologize for the technical difficulties that we are having right now. Richard is on the road, as he said before. He was just at the AIA conference in Alabama, their state conference, presenting the evidence that you are seeing here, and a lot of people showing interest right now in the information that we're showing. And I believe we're getting Richard back.
And hello, we're coming back. I'm going to share my screen again, and we'll pick it up at CNN. Sorry, folks. We're doing our best. We've got 3 bars in 4G. That should help us get through the remainder of our broadcast today. And here's where we left off. Shall we pick it up here, Andy?
That's perfect. We were talking about CNN's predicting that this building, or saying that this building had come down before it had.
Yes, and in fact, 7 hours. And I'm going to play that video again so people get it to hear it. Let me know if you can't hear it, Andy.
In New York, Alan Frank joins us on the phone in Lower Manhattan. Alan?
Alan, just 2 or 3 minutes ago, there was yet another collapse or explosion. I'm now out of sight. A Good Samaritan has taken me in on Blaine Street. But at 11:15, there was another collapse or explosion following the 10:30 collapse of the second tower. And a firefighter who rushed by us estimated that 50 stories went down. The street filled with smoke. It was like a forest fire roaring down a canyon. Now, as I think Patty Fabg and others have told you, all of Manhattan is covered, downtown Manhattan is covered with thick white ash and building material.
Fascinating. So we have a 50-story building that went down. Well, guess what? No 50-story building in the afternoon. No building went down at world. There were few other World Trade Center buildings that were only partially damaged, no complete collapse. Come down at that time completely. We wouldn't have these incredible videos that show the complete total shatter structure from top to bottom in free fall in 6.5 seconds. No, it would have been completely obscured by the massive dust cloud in when the doors went down that morning. So maybe been speculated that it was supposed to come down, announced that early, that down, because there was a perhaps plan for it to be down at that time, because it would be obscured then and hidden, if you leading many to those construction workers that we saw walking away from Building 7 explosion and now that the building's going to blown up. I mean, that they were going back in the afternoon to fix a dud that didn't go off. Well, that's speculation. We don't rely on speculation at
Okay, and I just want to
controlled demolition. Do we have?
I just want to let you
Go ahead,
know,
Andy.
Richard, that we're experiencing another lag, so you may just want to check your bars again. Please continue.
Yeah, I got 3G. So, unless you can't make out. So I'll go ahead and we have number 9 and 10 molten steel, and thermite incendiaries. All of what we've seen so far is explosive destruction. And guess what? Fire any one of these, we believe, let alone all 10 of them. So with additional circumstantial and evidence, testimony, and so forth, testimony we have amounts to proof beyond a reasonable doubt of world demolition. We're asking you to consider, as you even in the original building report by NIST that came out in 2007, 2008, later, this hot potato, hoping maybe that others would forget about it. Well, who's in this building? We have lots of questions, of course. I mean, we have some very highly secure tenants that management capable of running the whole city in the event of a hurricane or a war. This commission, which lost thousands, actively pursuing against for this. Now, we're looking for criminal investigators and investigative journalists to do their job to answer these. Who had motive? Who had opportunity? Who had access to the building? These are important questions. Technical and building. We're focused on science. We want answers to all of these questions, but we're not capable of providing all of them. We need you to take some action, therefore, and create more visibility for the need for others to do their job. Pressure on Congress by signing our petition calling for a new investigation. Pressure on the media by taking a talk to them. But we want to become a member of AE911Truth. So we have to go to, as I mentioned today, last week, this weekend, we were at the AIA convention of American Institute of Architects. That takes money. Our members support us. We can go to more of those conventions, raise more awareness, to AE911Truth. We need your help also by way of volunteering, and Andy can help us with some ideas just about that. Andy? Calling Andy. And what Andy will be sharing with us is ways that you can volunteer with AE911Truth. He's our volunteer.
Richard? Okay.
Go to the website. There.
Okay, and I apologize, people, for the technical difficulties.
Go ahead.
This is some of the difficulties you run into when you're broadcasting from the road, but anybody that is moved by this evidence certainly knows that other people should be hearing about it, other people in the building trades industries. You can volunteer simply by going to AE911Truth.org, and under the What You Can Do tab, you can click to volunteer, fill out the form, and we will get in touch with you and get you involved on one of the many ongoing projects that we have going.
You know, screen the DVDs also. I'm going to show you a very special DVD that you can
Okay, while you're waiting, Richard right now is going to play the DVD trailer for our film 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out Against, features 43 different experts in the fields of engineering, architecture, chemistry, metallurgy, physics, so many others. It's a very provocative film, and one that has already been played in PBS in Colorado and has been shared worldwide all over the internet. That trailer hopefully will be playing in just a moment. After that, we will be getting to your questions today. And as I said before, we also have this information available in our booklet, Beyond Misinformation, which is available for free for download on a PDF format right off of this page, right on the AE911Truth.org/webinars page. If you have any difficulty downloading that, you can certainly get in touch with me, Steele at AE911Truth.org. There's an extra E in my name at the end, so ASTEELE at AE911Truth.org, and I can get you a copy of that PDF. You can also buy hard copies of that as well. And the purpose, of course, is to inform yourself, to share it with others, to get this important information in front of as many people as you can. And again, like I said, we will be getting to your questions shortly. Typically, we don't have these technical problems. If you would like to watch an earlier version of this webinar for this part 1 series of World Trade Center 7, we do have earlier versions. This is a continuing cycle that we're doing monthly with this series. And of course, next week we're going to be moving on into other aspects of the World Trade Center 7's destruction, and then moving into the Twin Towers as well. So we are constantly doing these all over the place, and we will continue to be doing that to try to reach out to as many professionals and others as we can. We're going to be trying to get to the top of these technical problems, so I'll be joining you again in just a moment. Please stick around. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're having some difficulty getting Richard back on. I wanted to make sure that we at least fielded some of the questions, the great questions that were submitted to this webinar while the broadcast was going on. And again, I want to apologize for this. You can watch earlier versions of this webinar, earlier broadcasts at AE911Truth.org's website. We'll actually get an earlier version of this segment in the webinar series on the page as part of the archive, so you can view it later. And also, too, if you are have any questions that haven't been answered today, or you have any further questions about this, you can submit these right into the question box here on this site, and we'll do our best to answer them in future webinar series. One of the first questions that we have gotten is, are there any renowned USA science professors with the status of Richard Feynman speaking out on this evidence of controlled demolition? We do have a number of experts, like I said, over 2,500 who have signed our petition. Some notable names was cited here in this presentation. Danny Juwenko, unfortunately, he's no longer with us. He passed away many years ago, but he controlled demolition expert. And he said right there when he was showing the video of Building 7 going down that this was a controlled demolition. Also featured in our film is Lynn Margolis. She is the former wife of Carl Sagan, and had some very reputable credentials behind her name. You can certainly Google that. And she speaks at length about the need for a new investigation based on the information that we are talking about, as well as Stephen Jones, one of the first people. He's a physics professor out of BYU, speaking. He's been speaking out about Building 7, has had a number of papers published on various other scientific issues and very prestigious journals. And we've got a whole long list of them. Some of them are featured at our website, AE911Truth.org. And then going even away from the science, former NSA Technical Director William Binney has spoken out too about the need for a new investigation. And I actually interviewed him on the show I do, and he said that the observable facts were ignored. And this was a person that was in charge with the safety and protection of the United States for a number of years during the Cold War. Our next question says, to me it sounds like NIST claiming fire alone caused this collapse is indirectly blaming the architects. Should there have been a congressional inquiry based on the NIST explanation? So essentially this question is saying is that it sounds like they're saying that there was a fault in the construction or the architecture of this building. So shouldn't there be a further inquiry? It would seem to think, or you would think that they would, because according to the official story, a few thermally expanding beams framing into a girder can push it off its seat and bring the whole building down in 7 seconds. Even though this has never